Shane Beamer in South Carolina wrap up day one of SEC Media Days, and I wouldn't say they stole the show necessarily, but had a fantastic day answering a lot of questions and a quiet confidence going into this season that is reminiscent of last year. We talked about what it means, what he said, and more. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler, in a very busy, loud, hectic, and fun College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta. Day one of Media Days is over. We're going to get into it here in a second. Before we do, I want to say thank you to everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team, my boss is over here right now, almost every day. So there you go. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at the Game Time app. You guys have heard me talk about Game Time before. You're going to hear me talk about them again. Right now, new customers can get download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We're less than 50 days away from football, and it's plenty of time to start getting some deals on tickets with our friends at Game Time. All right, so today we are going to get into we have two episodes coming. First one, we're going to get into everything that happened during Media Days. It was a fun day one. I thought Beamer did a great job, very long-winded, as he tends to be, but also fantastic at delivering the message, growing the culture, and then also growing the brand, which he's done a great job of. So we'll get into that. And then at the in the second and third segment, we're going to also talk about some of the players and the things that they said, and just some of the quiet, in-between-the-lines things that I feel like are starting to happen that are very reminiscent of last year, when we started getting around this part of the season going into the 2024 as same as 2025. All right, Beamer took the podium. He was the second coach to go after Brian Kelly. And listen, he delivers like a State of the Union address, whatever, talks about like, you know, the three players that he brought with him, how proud he is of them, went into great detail about how proud he is at several little pats on the back of not just the fact that they have the best, the highest graduation rate they've had in the entire program history. They also have 31 players that were able to make some sort of academic honor roll, and they also have 31 players that are going to graduate when they go into December following the regular season. Also, I thought one of the things that he said that was one of my low-key favorite moments of it was him saying, when we play in the postseason this December. That was one of many things that I felt like Shane Beamer didn't seem at all shy, nervous, or more than anything, lacking in confidence. So that was the first thing. He also got into the fact that some of the stuff around the program is his best it's ever been. You talk about like from a donor standpoint, a booster standpoint, and also a fan standpoint, all the renovations that are going into place, as well as the most season tickets they've ever sold going into a season. So going into year 5, it's a lot different than how Shane Beamer looked going into year 1, year 2, really even last year. Some of the stuff he said, listen, it's a lot of coach speak, but Beamer was pretty clear about what he feels about this team and knows the challenges they have in place, because the amount of production, the amount of leadership, and the amount of players in general you lost on defense, as well as the interior offensive line, everyone knows that. Everyone knows that could be a potential issue, especially as he put it right up the middle, which was Tonka, TJ Sanders, and then all three linebackers you have to replace. But the thing that he went into immediately after that, which was the recruiting they've been able to do, the players they have on campus now that have been on the roster for over a year, that just haven't emerged yet. And he brought up something I thought about this quote that my buddy Chris Doring used to always say about Dan Mullen when he was at Florida, and that was this. Anytime you go into a season and you feel like you're not having a ton of what's the best way to put it? Hype. You're not like every year South Carolina goes into a season, it feels like it's 7-5, between 5 and 7, 7-5. But here's the thing: everyone thought they were going to do that last year, right? So it's understandable if you are worried about the concerns they have on that defense, but at the same time, probably were concerned about it last year too. We didn't know that Kyle Kennard was going to have be the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. No one knew that. So defensively, there are some things they are hoping to fine tune and figure out who the leaders are going to be, especially in that linebacking core and especially the interior defensive line. But he had a lot of positive things to say, not just about the talent they have in there, but the depth and the bodies. That's the biggest thing that was different, I think, this year than last year is him talking about the depth on this roster versus what it's been in his first couple of years. Obviously, the recruiting's been much, much better, even though today was tough. But overall, the talent on the roster that they've acquired, whether it be from high school or, in the transfer portal, is much, much higher. The floor, the floor, like the talent floor of this team, is much higher than it's been in any year that he's been here. So that was the first thing we talked about. The second part of it was looking at the schedule and the comments that were made about the schedule. We talked about, like, that was a big, big theme today. Lane Kiffin talked about it. Brian Kelly talked about it, how difficult the SC schedule is. He went out of his way to make sure everyone knew that this is a schedule they get to play, and they're excited about doing it. And the mantra of this team going into 2025 is, how do we figure out how to elevate what we did last year, right? Which is, like, obviously, pretty standard stuff. But year 5 with Clayton White, year 2 with LaNorris Sellers, the entire mantra is taking things further in 2025 than you did in 2024. The entire mindset, he said, of this team, and also DQ Smith brought this up in the player breakoff parts, which was they felt that they were a playoff worthy and playoff contending team talent-wise last year going into the season. No one else did, but they did. So that's exactly how they feel again going into 2025. It's just a lot of names that we don't know yet, that most people don't know yet. So that was the first part of one of his kind of filibuster. They answered some questions as well. Some of the questions he answered, obviously talked about LaNorris, talked about what they are planning to do offensively that'll be different from Dow Loggins versus Mike Shula. One of the things he said about Shula I thought was interesting was, obviously he's never going to throw shade at Dow Loggins, but he feels like this offense is better. And it's not just because of Shula, but he feels like they're in a place where there's so much returning experience on, like, the offensive side of the ball, especially at the skill positions. They feel like on and off the field, they are in a better place than they were a year ago, which is saying something, because the last 6 games of last year, they were one of the best offenses in the entire SEC. So Shula going into this year, I think the biggest thing that concerns me is not the play calling, it's not the ideology, the identity of this offense or anything like that at all. It is how comfortable in the communication is Shula with the team and the team with Shula, specifically Sellers, specifically the offense. And by all means, it sounds like it's been a fantastic transition so far into his era. So we won't know until it's game 1 against Virginia Tech, but going into last year versus this year, the difference in how calm Beamer felt, how at ease, and again, how confident he was, it feels like a lot of times that he talks, he rushes through what he's saying. It feels like he's got, like, a chip on his shoulder, and he's, like, trying to, like, make sure, like let me, like, drive the point home so that we're tired of being, like, dismissed, we're tired of being disrespected, and this team is a lot better than you think it is, right? Let me inform you on something you probably didn't know about how good we actually are. He didn't feel like that at all. He just felt like he just stood there, delivered everything, and felt really, really good about his team going into this year. Now, here is the other part when he answered questions from the media. What do you do? Listen, I think where that confidence too is coming from is twofold, right? It's the fact that he knows that this roster is more talented at the very least than he has had in his 5 years or previous 4 years since he's been in Columbia. He also knows you retained everyone on the staff besides Loggins. You have Clayton White coming back. He mentioned, like, my favorite stat, we bring it up all the time, at South Carolina leading the SEC in takeaways over the last 4 years with 88 total. So all of those things, he had, like, a finger on the pulse of those things. But it wasn't just the fact the roster. It is also much, much more about the confidence that feel like he has in what this staff can do in terms of developing. And we talk about that word a lot. And it's one of the questions I asked him when I was able to get the mic while he was at the podium. But his ability and the staff's ability to develop is going to be key this year, right? It's going to be key. Making sure that you don't regress anywhere, because you should have better talent at receiver, not running back, but maybe more depth in the offensive line. Should be a better offensive line. Quarterback play should be better. Defensive line should be fine on the edges. You got to figure out a guy to replace Kennard, but all new names in the linebacking core, and then you also have the strength of the defense, which is the secondary. Having said all that, knowing that you've been able to develop no-name 3-star players over and over and over again, and especially this past year, the recent track record, knowing that you've been able to turn the corner where the narrative was when he first started, oh, you're 2-10 in road games in the SEC. Last year you go 3-1, you win those games by an average of 20 points. It just felt like a much different we have arrived feeling the way he delivered his entire message. When we come back, I want to tell you the question that I was able to ask Coach Beamer about recruiting, development, and the stuff we just talked about, and plenty of quotes of what he said about LaNorris and how they're going to try and manage him in the running the football as well as being effective in his skill sets. So when we come back, we'll talk about all. All right, welcome back in. Before we get into the next part of the show, going over more quotes and the things that were said at Media Days from South Carolina and head coach Shane Beamer, want to give a shout out to our friends at the Game Time app. They are sponsoring the show today. And listen, we've all been there. Logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's why Game Time is effective and helpful and the best in the game at making sure you get what you need from your ticket, all your ticketing needs. Game Time comes in hot. And I tell you what, Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. If you are tired of scrolling through all the different sites, figuring out the best deal, figuring out 2 seats together, figuring out what the price is going to be before and after you actually go to the final page to pay, Game Time takes care of all that. They have your all-in pricing up front. You can see a view of your seats from before you ever even step in the stadium, and take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time right now. Because when you download the Game Time app, create an account and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. But again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. All right. All right, so Beamer's at the podium. I made sure I got my hand up early. Felt like a lot of people were trying to. It was a very popular segment. It felt like, but I asked him. I said, "Listen, we talked about this at the NFL draft. You took three-star players outside the top 500 nationally from a recruiting standpoint, and turned all 3 of them into top 50 NFL draft picks. What does that do? Like, what kind of story of development does that help tell to future recruits and players you're trying to bring in either from the portal or high school of what the staff has been able to do from a development standpoint?" The reaction I got was fantastic, for one. The immediate response was, "Great question. Are you free to help out on official visits this weekend next year?" He said, "Something we pride ourselves in on development. We ask high school prospects or transfers, what are you looking for in a school? I know there are more factors at play right now than ever. 90% of the time, the word development is going to come out of their mouth, whether it's a transfer, they want to be developed, or a high school senior, they want to be developed. It's hard to argue against our blueprint, if you will, because of what guys have done. There are not a lot of misses. Whether it be Nicky Benwari, a 3-star recruit from Irmo, or even this year with DQ Smith, who's a former high school quarterback getting ready to be a 4-year starter and have a chance to go to the next level. From a transfer standpoint, Demetrius Knight, I didn't know this, by the way. He brought this up. He said he transferred from another school and had been at 2 previous schools, and one of the schools called them and said, that guy cannot play for you. He's not good enough to play for you. Ends up being a 2nd-round pick. So credit the young men and what they're about from a character standpoint. Also give some credit to our program, the culture, the people in our program, the whole development aspect, the weight room with Luke Day. I mean, he hit everyone. We've got a great thing from all across our building that is into developing the total player and total student athlete. And those guys are great examples of that as well. We're not perfect, I understand that, but when you talk about the culture we have in place, it's hard to argue with the results from a development standpoint. So, that was a fantastic answer. And also something it's like, it should be a bigger storyline. It should be a much bigger storyline because it has been a consistent thing with this staff, not just the continuity, not just the fact that they've been able to retain everyone on the staff almost year over year, but the fact that they've been across the board been able to develop that kind of talent. Anyway, one of the next questions somebody brought up was I thought very interesting because you talk about how effective LaNorris Sellers is. We talk about the sacks. He had 41 sacks last year, 41 sacks the year before. But him being so effective with his legs, him being so strong and big and athletic to where he's not able to be dragged down immediately, extend the play, evade the rush, like him extending plays and playing backyard football are some of his best moments, right? It's some of his biggest highlights, all that kind of stuff. You're hoping, even with what you lost in the offensive line, you're hoping you're going to go into this season where you don't have to depend on that, where he can just drop back and play quarterback. So, and the other part of that is trying to figure out a way to limit the possibility of him being in way too many run situations and not have to be dependent solely on that part of the game. Like that, like we talked about a couple weeks ago with Rocket Sanders, you had over 63% of your total run plays in last year's offense were at the running back position. It's a massive chunk that almost 40% came from the quarterback position, right? And not even just with Sellers, with Ashford and everything like that. This year, I think the stakes are a little bit higher. I think they have their eyes set on something a little bit more than just trying to get to 6 wins. So you're not going to play scared and be overly protective of him. You want to let him be able to do what he does best. But you also want to give him a pocket, and you also want to be able to figure out a way that he can be at his best, not under duress, because that athleticism is not going to go anywhere. The other part of that is figuring out the right people, the right 5 that are going to start up front, and making sure everyone's bought in from the outside as well. Remember last year we talked about this. One of the most impressive things this staff has done is getting Nick Harbor, he was trying to qualify for the U.S. Olympic team going into last summer. And 3 months later, you were able to make him buy into blocking. So how do you make sure that goes across the board, across the depth chart, across the board with all the new freshmen that are going to get plenty of playing time? So the other question that I thought was a fantastic answer from him as well is how do you balance trying to turn the page on last season's success while still trying to emulate some of those elements you brought in? I think this is, again, going back to Dowell Loggins. And he deserves a ton of credit for how you close the season and the final 6 games. But let's not be a prisoner of the moment and forget what happened in the first 6 games. The first 6 games of last season, you were one of the worst offenses in the entire conference. We were in the bottom 5 of, I think we did the deep dive on it. It was like 23 of like 30 offensive categories. The only thing that they were ranked in the top 3 in the conference was punting, right? So, how do you go into this year and make sure that you are able to hit the ground running and pick up the same momentum you had as you closed last regular season, especially at the start? Because the first 5 games you have, Kentucky, Vandy, Virginia Tech, South Carolina State. There's another one in there I'm forgetting. You have to win those games before you need to get to 6 wins as early as possible, because that final 6 to 7 games you're going to play in October, November, it's going to be a gauntlet, just like it was last year. But his comment on that and what his actual response was, he says it happens every year. It's because just because something happened last year doesn't mean it happens this year. For our team to make sure our guys will realize all the work that went into 2024, it's going to take all that and more to go where we want to in 2025. Very, very adamant about not having 9 wins be the benchmark for success. It's a successful season, but that's not where they want the benchmark to be or the ceiling to be at all. And you look at this program historically, and you can count on 2 hands how many 9-win seasons they've had. Like, it's not been great. Everyone knows that. But that does not mean that moving forward, that 9 wins means, well, you know what? Lost 3 games you probably shouldn't have lost. Besides Ole Miss, you were one play, a couple seconds away from beating Alabama. We all know what happened at the LSU game. But figuring out ways to make sure that you go into the season where like the goal obviously is a national championship and SEC championship, but 9 wins is not the standard. You want to be above that. So went on to say plenty of great things about LaNorris, obviously. Love what he had to say about DQ Smith. It kind of feels like he's just the next in line of a a very, very consistent defensive back in that Clayton White secondary. That it's almost in the same way we bring this up all the time offensively. We talk about the receivers, how for several years in a row there, you didn't know who was going to be going into the year. We didn't know Xavier Legette was going to go off for 1,200 yards. We didn't know that Juice Wells was going to pop off in 2022 or whatever it was. We didn't know that Josh Van or guys like that were going to have the seasons they had. But it seemed like there was always one guy that was going to end up being the guy at that position. It's kind of the same for the secondary. The secondary continued to be one of the biggest strengths of this team and one of the best units of any team in the SEC. So I love that part. The other stuff we had, we sat with some of the players and talked with them about what they're expecting going into the year. And more importantly, some of the names from freshmen, underclassmen that have not seen the field a ton last year, but are going to have to take major roles this year. So when we come back, we're going to tell you just exactly what DQ Smith, who he had to say. He thought it stood out at not just the linebacker position, but also from the freshman class and newcomers from the portal that are going to make immediate impacts that we probably haven't talked enough about yet. What's up, dude? All right, guys, closing out today's show. Day one of media days. Been a really fun day. LaNorris was mobbed, obviously, the breakouts of the three players. Got to talk with DQ Smith for a second and basically discuss some of the underclassmen that we don't know yet, who's going to be next man up this year, and especially at linebacker. What are the names that we have not seen as much on the field from last year, but are going to be either very impactful players because they're going to have to step up right away. And the name that kept coming back, it shouldn't be a surprise. It should not be a surprise. But Fred Johnson, the rising sophomore, former four-star, 6'3", 245, from Norfolk, Virginia. Going to be a sophomore. And the other one from the portal was Sean Murphy. He's a former four-star out of high school. I think he was like a top 100, top 150 player. Went to Bama, then went to Florida State. Redshirt junior, ton of experience. It'll be year 4, at least for him. So those two paired together in the middle. Because, again, when you talk about concerns, and Beamer was vocal about this, the biggest concerns he has going into this team, it's not the stuff you would have thought. I thought Russell Faison would have been brought up. That wasn't brought up. I thought something would have been brought up about, the turnovers that from LaNorris and the fumbles and all that kind of stuff. The things he brought up right away was the defense and what you're replacing directly in the middle of it at the defensive tackle and then all three linebacker spots. And then I didn't know this, but this is year 26 that Beamer has been a coach at some level. He said this is the first time in 26 years of coaching he's ever seen a team or a roster have to replace as much talent or as many players on special teams as this South Carolina team. New kicker, new punter, new kick returner, new kickoff specialist, new punt returner, new holder, and I think he said new snapper as well. I mean, that is a massive turnover. So figuring out how you go into the season hitting the ground running without any sort of hiccups in all three of those phases, because the staple of this team has been having special teams be a strength. We'll see how that goes. But the fact that Fred Johnson is finally getting some love, and I don't know what the starting lineup is going to be on defense when they take the field against Virginia Tech, but it feels like him. It feels like Sean Murphy. I still think Donovan Darden will have a place just because physically he checks all the boxes. And then the newcomers you have coming in that have not hit the field yet. That was the name that kept coming back. The other one, when you talk about the defensive line, the name that kept coming back over and over and over again was the other side of Dylan Stewart, who's going to step up and be not necessarily Kennard, but who is going to be the other force off the edge. And Brian Thomas Jr. seems like he's having a phenomenal spring and offseason and prime for a big year. And here's the thing. I don't know if he's going to be one of the top 5 to 10 pass rushers in the SEC or the country at all. I do know that the other side of that defensive line coming off the edge is going to be Dylan Stewart. and he is going to demand a double team on almost every single play, especially on third downs and passing plays. That opens up a ton of opportunity across the defensive line. And what you've done is not only come in and put big physical, like physically ready bodies to come in and play right away. You've got former 5-stars, you got former 4-stars, you got guys from the portal that are, going into year 3 or 4. That was a strength of last year's team that we didn't really talk enough about, which was you had, it seemed like almost that entire defense was all not just seniors or upperclassmen, but like 5th and 6th year seniors, especially on the defensive line. So being able to go out and get Jalen Brown from Mizzou, being able to get Brian Thomas still on and have him on that roster across from Dylan Stewart. If it's him, if it's like I said, Jalen Brown, if it's Gear, there's a lot of options. And what you might see for the first time, in comparison to last year you had 4 to 5 guys that you could rotate on those interior defensive line positions, so you weren't gassed, and you were able to get production out of all of them. You might see that same type of performance and that type of production just on the outside this year. So, and again, I think that you have to replace all 3 starters at linebacker, and those are guys that one was a 3-year starter for you, one was a 5th-year senior, and the other one was a 5th-year senior from the portal out of his 3rd or 4th school. All those players are gone. From a talent eval and recruiting standpoint, you're replacing almost every single one of them with a higher ranked player. So a lot of opportunities for this team. That is all for today's episode, at least from the media day standpoint. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that was said from the players and some other news from the day itself outside of South Carolina. Tonight's episode, which will be a lot more comfortable because there will be 1,000 people around me feeding into my ADD. We're going to talk about the recruiting mishaps because yet again, this time it was Samarian Watkins, a longtime lean to South Carolina, surprises everyone, picks Texas A&M. So kind of feels like it puts a lot of pressure on Landing Duckworth in a week or so. So we'll see. But we'll talk about that on the next episode. And until then, go Cox.